Welcome to the Recovery Roundtable podcast, where the journey to sobriety opens up through powerful discussions and shared experiences. Join your host, Mark, who will bring you stories of triumph and resilience from the heart of Pacific Shores recovery. Every episode offers insights and support, guiding you through the challenges of addiction recovery. Thank you for joining our community. If you're ready to start or continue your recovery journey, we're here to inspire and support you. Let's explore recovery together.
Thank you for coming down, and we just met, man. I'm stoked. I saw your GQ picture, so that's as far as I got to know you.
Ripped from the headlines. I'm glad we're getting to connect as well. Your energy is calming, and I usually walk into these things kind of anxious. Why I don't necessarily know. I feel like it's because there is a part of coming on to a podcast or being completely vulnerable with a whole new audience of people who don't know me or my story. There's something that's beautiful about that, but there's also a lot of anxiety around it because there are things that need to be talked about, especially for people in recovery, especially for men in recovery. A big part of my story was being able to learn how to trust another man 100%. And just having faith that God was placing the right people in my life for the right reason, right? And so I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to dive in 100%.
Yeah, well, what you're talking about is trusting other people, because I know when people hear that, a lot of times the assumption is, well, that's probably because it's worked out for you. But before we even came in, you're talking about some of the relationships. You're like, man, once the sheets were pulled down, it was like, oh man, that trust has been breached. So let's dive right in. How do you navigate and still continue this journey of, I still want to trust life. I still want to trust faith. I still want to trust, even though there's going to be people that aren't necessarily trustworthy.
One thing that I have, a mantra of sorts that I have, is that people and things will disappoint you. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And the true measure of a man is how you react to it, right? So I'm not necessarily the perfect example of reacting soundly. I have definitely had my moments where I was very limbic, and it was an anger-fueled reaction that did not get me anywhere. It actually got me more pain than serenity, right? But I've learned a lot from that because I end up hurting myself in the process, right? So when I get angry like that, hurt like that, when I detach from people, places, and things due to an unpleasant experience, and I write off that area of my life as a result of unpleasant experiences that are had, I am robbing myself from the ability to be of service to other people.
Such a great way to look at it. Because I know a lot of times when we argue with reality, we're the only one getting hurt. Of saying how it should be, and reality is like, no, this is how it should be because it's how it was.
Right.
So do you mind kind of going back a little bit of what led you to getting into the industry, to want to be of service and to help? Because usually on the other side of this transformation and the beautiful side where we're helping people, there's extreme pain. So
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
mind jumping in there?
So 100%. I got sober March 6th, 2015. And God gets all the credit for that because I was never capable of stopping until I gave up. I am a Texan with deep, deep East Coast roots. Entire family, New York, Pennsylvania, Jersey. There was, I was never using as a result of circumstance. Life was not hard, right? There were some things that happened that in later years in life made me question my value, question why I wasn't enough for X, Y, and Z, and I'll get into that in a second. But my mother is a successful attorney, right? So I did not have a hard life. That was not why I got loaded. I got loaded because I enjoyed the effects produced by drugs and alcohol, right? And it wasn't a problem until I couldn't stop. You know what I mean?
It's never a problem until one day you go, crap, this might be a problem.
Yeah. It was, I was like, ooh, I'm not feeling that great. Like this, I think it's time to stop. And then your brain's like, but is it though? right? Is it that bad yet? So I was adopted. My biological mother was an addict, and I was adopted by my biological aunt. So I was adopted into my own family,
Okay.
right? So when my biological mother got her life together and got sober, she was reintroduced to me. I believe I was like probably 5 or 6 when that
Okay, so
happened.
still
Did
early.
not really have the understanding of it, but since then she has gotten her master's, owns a house, like gave birth to my youngest brother, raised him through college. He actually is graduating with his MBA next month. Like, I mean, like,
Wow.
it's just crazy to see like what changing your life can do. And I have these examples of it,
Mm.
right? But I also have examples of like reasons why I was supposed to stay away, right, from drugs and alcohol. And I was taught that from a very young age by my mother. Um, I did not realize until later the effect that would have on me, regardless of the fact that I had all these things. I had everything anybody could ever want, never wanted for anything, had all these opportunities that 1% of the population get, Um, but when I got sober and I was looking at the deficit internally and I'm taking stock of all those things, I'm wondering like, why wasn't I enough to fight for? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at the relationship that I have with my biological mother, and it's a healthy relationship, but there's definitely been some resentment that I've had to work through.
Sure.
And she has tried to position herself back in my life in a way that I struggle with. And I've had to have conversations with my sponsor about it, with my therapist, with my mom,
Mm.
about why I feel this way about the woman who gave life to me.
Mm.
Because while she gave life to me, she did not raise me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so those are things that I've had to kind of work through. And I felt weird about it, working through stuff like that as a 34-year-old man, right? At the time, it had me wondering, like, is this normal to feel like this? Am I the issue for having
Mm.
these thoughts, right? Um, am I truly a God-fearing man in this situation, or do I need to like let go of everything and just try to be more open and willing to that relationship? Um, Drugs took everything from me. It started as a way to get attention from my parents,
Mm.
and it turned into the reason that nobody was speaking to me anymore. And you think that the only thing that's here for you, which for me was heroin, when it was just me and heroin, when there was nothing left, nobody left, I realized that was the thing that was taking everything away.
Mm.
Coupled with my actions and my lack of accountability, what else do you have to look at? Right.
Yeah.
And it hurt bad enough for me to want to change. And I said that 27 times. I went to treatment, 27 different rehabs. I did the designer rehab thing. I did, only the bougiest rehabs. I'm only going to this if I can do this, that, and the other, and then at the end, my mom's like, "You're going in network." And I'm like, "No," you know what I mean? I just have
Oh, sorry, that was great.
this crazy,
No.
I'm like, "No, oh my God, I'm going where the poor people go." And that was the program that saved my life. Really, like,
So what changed for you mentally though? Because I'll just end that question there. What changed for you to go from 27 different trial and errors to I'm all in on this?
it wasn't even like an I'm all in on this. It was like man, I'm tired. I'm tired of this, right? And it turned into I'm willing to try something different to see if I feel better, to
Mm.
see if I like myself more, right? Um, and at first I didn't, because when all that was gone, when my coping skill was gone, I saw everything else that I'd struggled with but had taken a back seat to addiction
Yeah.
start to rear its ugly head, right? So shopping, sex and love addiction, my eating disorder, like all these things are popping up left and right. And I'm like, okay, blinders. As long as I don't get loaded, everything else is going to be okay, right? And it worked like that for a while. And after I got my first year sober, I was like, Ashton, where are the cameras? You know what I mean? This is a joke. Like, there's no way that this is like real. Second year of sobriety came. I was like, okay, that's nuts. I haven't used in 2 years. But, third year, I'm probably going to fall off. Third year comes. I'm like, I feel like I can do this. 4, 5, 6 comes. And with each year comes its fair set of challenges in that year, right?
Sure.
And I preserved, and I kept showing myself little by little that like sobriety is possible, recovery is possible, and life can get really good. But if you forget about the other things that keep like popping up and showing themselves in your life, it's gonna come back and bite you. And after 9 years of sobriety, the last 3 months of 2024 almost took my decade away from me.
What
It
do
was
you
the
mean?
closest that I've ever been to getting high. So I got mono in September of last year. And I laid in bed I was hospitalized for a couple days. I laid in bed after when I got home. I laid in bed for like 2.5, 3 weeks. And in that period, I lost like 15 pounds. And I saw what my body had done just by not going to the gym for 2 weeks and laying around.
Mhm.
And in my head, my eating disorder said, let's double that. Let's push that a little further. So in a 30-day period, I lost about 30 pounds. And I got called out on it by my employer at one of my brunch series. And shortly after that, I had a very real conversation with my sponsor, my support group, and my employers about, hey, you represent a network of treatment centers, and one of them is an eating disorder program. You cannot be working and struggling like this. So something needs to give.
Was there any internal part that was trying to get your attention of this is hypocritical, or was there a lot of...
In my illness, the only thing I was thinking about was my fears, right?
Yeah.
My lack of trust around food, my lack of trust around what my body does with it, and the internal narrative around the difference of healthy fat versus the word fat and what the association looks like for me. I've told people this several times. If I saw somebody on the side of the road speaking to some random person the way that I talk to myself at times, I'd be fighting in the street. You know what I mean? And so the hardest part of this whole treatment process has been changing that narrative around what is healthy, what does nourishment look like, and what am I deserving of as a human being on this earth.
So how were you able to start to change that narrative? Because that's the narrative almost all of us have at some point in our life until we start to recognize it and become an observer. So I'm curious of what tactical tools you've been able to utilize to help with that voice.
Therapy.
Yeah.
A lot of therapy. I did 2 months in an eating disorder residential, a little shy of 2 months. And that was from October through the end of November. And then in December, I started a PHP program for eating disorder. And I just graduated on Wednesday.
Congratulations, man. That's
Thank
huge.
you. So it's been 6 months, and the work is never done, right? It's just like AA. It's just like the program. It's just like sobriety. I will have good days and I will have bad days. Recovery looks a lot different in the eating disorder space. I will say that. And it's the main thing for me was looking with a head full of program, looking at recovery from eating disorder as not a linear path. I have been so conditioned to think like, oh, you use once, you start your days over, right? With eating disorder, it's much different. So it's like you can slip, you can struggle, but it's all about what you do from there that defines the trajectory of what you're doing.
It sounds like continuum many corrections.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's different. It's different because I work out a lot. I am a fitness advocate. Self-care is a very big part of my life now, and as a result of being able to do what I do, I understand that I've had a very unhealthy relationship with movement, and all of that was so that I could push down the other things that I was struggling with, because if I like the way I look, everything else is okay for now, right? And then when that blew up in my face, it was like, okay, well, what more work needs to be done? Because
Yeah.
it's obvious that there is some.
And I'm so glad you hit on that, because anytime we are looking for a method of sedation from experiencing what's going on, it's only a matter of time before it's the analogy I like using. It's like taking a beach ball and trying to hold it underwater. And it's like, if you just go one foot down, you can kind of manage it.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is you try to go deeper and deeper, that same force keeps coming up until it doesn't like slowly rise up.
Shoots
it
out.
just shoots
Hits
up.
you
And
right in the face.
like, I think of like National Geographic slow-mo, the water just ripping as it breaks above. But our emotions are so similar in understanding this. So a lot of times, like when you first shared about with heroin, people see, oh, okay, that's a problem. I can understand that. But when we start talking about food, we start talking about sex, we start talking about even just stuffing emotions. There's different things where it's like the drug of choice, and I don't mean to discount the others, but is irrelevant. It's how am I coping and what am I learning? So you said 6 months of therapy, and we don't have to get into your specific therapy, but can you kind of share some of the tools and the coping mechanisms
Right.
that you've learned that will help?
So for that specifically, they're big proponents of DBT and CBT, which comes down to a system of checks and balances within your body and using tools to distract yourself, right? So looking around, breathing techniques, counting things you can see, touch,
5,
smell,
4, 3, 2,
and so I'm just like, okay, I sit there, and when I started, I was so activated so easily, because one of the number one things that bothers me in my eating disorder is the feeling of fullness, right? So after eating a meal, like the discomfort that I feel as a result of like just eating would drive me to engage in behavior, right? And what it came down to was there's a window of tolerance, right? So if I'm staring at a window, the top is where I'm like overly activated, like there's nothing that's going to keep me from engaging in behavior. The bottom is where I'm underactivated, nothing's on the radar. And then the center is where I'm looking straight ahead and focused, right? Aware of how I'm feeling, but not in any danger. I want to be in that window of tolerance, because if I forget history, I'm doomed to repeat it on the bottom, right? And if I'm on top, I'm in a constant battle with myself. What's helped me the most has been talking, honestly. I'm a big proponent of, the power that speech has over your struggles. When you talk about it, it takes the power away from it in certain situations, right? Which is why I think talk therapy is so helpful in so many different instances, because when you hear your own words coming out, it in some cases is easier to formulate a solution to a problem that you're having. With me, my sober support group, my support group is a bunch of gym going men who don't necessarily understand the dichotomy of an eating disorder and why I don't just eat more, or why I can't just not throw up my food. You know what I mean? So a big part of that was finding a therapist who, thank God, had the experience through the outpatient program that I went to. And then also being in a room of people who understood it. Yeah. Up until probably 2 weeks ago, I was the only man in that room. But in residential, there were 2 other men there with me. So I got to share that experience of healing in like the darkest part with other men. And so that was healing in and of itself, right? But the thing that was the craziest is how I felt like I was not ready to discharge on Wednesday, and how I'd already extended my discharge date twice, because I was like, I am terrified of doing this by myself. But the reality of it is that I'm not doing it by myself.
Well, and you brought up so many great things. And one of the things, we just had a client graduate 8 months.
Wow.
And I mean, even the clinical team's like, this is a miracle, seeing how this person turned. And this individual came in right before her graduation. She says, I'm gonna get a shirt made, Mark. It says, I'm only here for 30 days. And on the back, it's gonna say ... 8 months later. And I'm like, I go, that's so brilliant, because most people come in going, I've been living a certain way for 3-4 decades. I'm only gonna do this for 30
30
days.
days is all I need.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's the typical mindset, and it's kind of like, great, we're just going to continue planting seeds to show you, but it's like to give yourself, I think you said this earlier, the grace and the space to really heal at a deep and mature level
Mhm.
in order so the next 30, 40 years are so much more enjoyable. So you mentioned a few different things. One of the things that came to my mind is, this was a long time ago. I'd never heard about this, but Eastern philosophy versus Western philosophy.
Mhm.
I spent some time in Japan, and they have, I think it's called igaki, but it's basically where you eat till you're satiated. So it's about 70% until you're full. And I never heard that before.
Mhm.
And such a wonderful way. And you were talking about kind of this spectrum, or this
Mhm.
scale. So that kind of popped up, and is a great thing. Um, where are you now? What's your life like nowadays, since you just kind of graduated, and you're working on a lot of areas? And I love what you said is, the work's never done.
Never.
Learning is something I do. It's not something I did.
Mhm.
So what does it look like now for you?
So life is in session fully, working a full-time job centered around helping people.
Mm,
That is my passion. I believe that is what God put me on this earth to do, is to help people find the freedom that I found. So working a lot. I cover 3 counties here in California just for one of the programs, and then I cover the entire West Coast of, the United States of America for the other programs that we have. Um, but what I do is I go to the gym, I nourish my body. The first thing I did when I got out of residential is I went to a tattoo appointment, and I got the word nourish tattooed on my hand, right
mm,
here, on my hand that I use my fork with, as a constant reminder that it's okay to eat, right? And one thing that I've also tried to do is kind of change my relationship with movement, because the way I looked at it, even while I was an outpatient, was, if I move my body today, I can eat and not feel guilty about it,
mm,
right? And so one of the huge things that they've kind of jammed into my ear is that it's okay to take days off, and you still have to eat on those days off,
mhm,
right? So life looks like trying to manage my own personal expectations with what I feel that God has me here to do. Um, and that looks different from day to day, right? I have the ability to change the narrative if I really want to. And first thought wrong, always. There will always be a reason for me to say something negative about myself, but why would I do that? Is that what I'm aiming for? No, I want to live in like positive solution today. Um, Even though it's way easier at times for me to live in negative, there's no solution in the negative though. So just living in negativity, that's not why I got sober. I got sober for freedom,
mm.
right? And I've experienced freedom. I experienced food freedom. The other day, went and got a cronut. Get out of here. Are you kidding me? I was like sitting in the car, couldn't even make it home. I just sat there and ate
Yeah.
half of it in the car. You know what I mean? And it was so nice just to be able to do that on my day off from the gym
Yeah.
and not feel guilty about it. And I got to speak to a sponsee this morning who was feeling a bit activated about some stuff, and we just got to sit there and level. And I asked him some real probing questions that he didn't necessarily have the answers for,
Mm,
but I hear the gears turning.
mhm,
So working with others is something that is very important to me today. I don't. There was a time where I was talking to my sponsor about this. There was a time from around the years 6 through 8 of my sobriety, probably 5 through 8, where I was going all the time. I had 14 sponsees. I was
yeah.
going, like, leaving my house at 7:30 in the morning, not coming home until 11:30. I had to be moving constantly because I was convinced that the minute I stopped moving, all the negative was going to.
This episode is brought to you by Pacific Shores. We have been an industry leader for over 25 years in the mental health and addiction space. We have helped thousands and thousands of individuals and families reclaim their lives. If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please reach out so we can do this together. Our number is 949 749 7317.
Catch up to me, and I was going to be screwed, right?
It's tough trying to outrun the shadow.
Oh man. And so the most prevalent thing that I have kind of latched onto over the past like year or so is just sitting with myself, regardless of how uncomfortable that is, and realizing that it's okay to not be running around doing something all the time. Like that my body needs to like relax and chill. And yeah, I might have some voices that pop up, some thoughts that are less than great, but those are just thoughts.
Yeah, it's part
They're
of the human
fleeting.
experience,
They
right?
pass, and I've become much more attuned to who I am when nobody else is there.
Hmm.
And it's the same person that I am when other people are there. It just takes a while to get through the BS to find Satch, because there are a lot of thoughts that go through my head that are so irrational, and based in fear based, right? So I try to sit with the fear and realize that fear is a very naturally occurring emotion, especially in men, that it's disguised as anger, right? Um, and that it's okay to feel that, but don't live in it. Don't set up shop there. Don't rent a 1-bedroom when you already got a 2-bedroom down the street,
So how are you able to provide the space and the grace to be able to sit with all of your thoughts and emotions and not necessarily attach meaning or weight to the ones that maybe don't serve you?
Um, I have a relentless support group, right? And when the thoughts get really gnarly, I talk to people about
Mm.
it. And it's not necessarily a therapist, it's my sponsor, my chosen family, because I'm not trying to burden my mom with some of this stuff. You know what I mean? Mom, I'm having thoughts about that, because she's in Texas. So her first thought is like, oh God, like, what's he?
Mm-hmm.
Thank God I've been able to give my mom 10 years of good sleep. That's what I take pride in today. You know what I mean? But what I do is the way I give myself grace and space is I look at the fact that I've been able to do hard things.
Mm.
I've proven to myself that I know how to stay sober regardless of what comes at me. Um, but it's not always easy to pick up that phone, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so the way that I do is I look at my track record. Yeah, things have been hard. I've lost friends, family, relationships as a result of this disease, right? Like I have seen people die who I saw the best and biggest futures for. I've had sponsees not be able to get another chance at this. I've had some of my best friends. I've had 4 people. I've lost 4 people this year, and that's, I mean, we're in April.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Um, Life doesn't stop, but it's about making the life quality that we're living, right? And so what I do is I continue to show up for myself, even when I might feel like I'm not deserving of having somebody to show up for me.
That's such a great way to put it. And earlier you hit on the power of spoken word and opening up. And I like to call it taking the war within and actually bringing it out. So all of a sudden I don't feel the weight of it. And it's not like in my ear, but now it's outside. So I've seen this theme a few times you brought up, which is so wonderful, is having a life team or a sponsor and grand sponsor team, just having people, a tribe around you to be able to share with no judgment of really what's going on. I call it real and raw. And to be with other men that are going through very similar things, and we can find strength in each other's vulnerability, as opposed to, for some reason, this thing says, oh, being vulnerable is weak. And it's the exact opposite.
One thing that I've noticed is that I am amazed at how many people reach out to me after I speak about what I'm struggling with, and they talk about how their struggle is very similar. Um, and when I first got into the rooms, they told us to focus on the similarities rather than the differences. And I was like, oh my God, how cliche. Like, oh, we're all here together suffering, But there were areas that I felt so alone and so misunderstood, until I spoke on it. And then I realized, oh man, I'm really not that different. You know what I mean? I'm not the only person that feels this way and struggles like this. And that was such a game changer. That was such a game changer. And having a sponsorship family that will never let me forget that is something that I am so grateful for. Me and my sponsor, our story is crazy. He used to manage the operations for the sober living or the drug and alcohol-free housing that I was a part of. I used to be a manager there. He fired me from management, and I was so resentful. I was like, this dude sucks. He sucks. But then life got really hard around my third year of sobriety, and I knew that I was going to get loaded if I didn't change something. And it wasn't that I wasn't going to meetings. It wasn't that I wasn't working the steps. It was the quality of the people that I had around me was less than stellar. And so I reached out to him and I begged him to take me on as a sponsee because I wasn't living in the house anymore. I'd moved out, and I was like, please, like I'm gonna go out, like hold me hostage. And he said yes, and that man taught me how to love and live my life again at 3 years sober. And here we are at 10. In the past 7 years, half the time I'm wanting to kick him in his throat, but like the other half, he holds me accountable and holds me to a higher standard, regardless of how I'm feeling. And he tells me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And in the moment, I get so activated by that. You know what I mean? I'm like, you don't even understand, And I have to look at that man. That man owns successful businesses. He has a wife. He has kids. And, 13 years ago, he was living under a bridge in Long Beach. You know what I mean? That's what, and I want to emulate that because that is the life that I want. Right. And I have 10 years sober, and I'm still striving to be like him, and I think that that's what keeps me going, and that's what keeps me working with guys, and that's what keeps me here is I have a goal in mind, and I haven't reached it yet. And I don't think he's ever going to fully reach his goal. I think it's just going to continue to grow and build and build. Yeah. And that's what we aim for, right? Happy, joyous, and free.
That's so beautifully put. So how would you like to be remembered?
Ooh, Mark, why would you do this to me? I want to be remembered as a man who tried no matter how hard it was, no matter how daunting the challenge. Like I want to be remembered as somebody who shows up no matter what. I want to be known as a trustworthy member of society, as someone who is just a good person, regardless of the lessons that I've been taught by being exposed to people who maybe aren't the best for me. I'm not going to sit there and say that they're bad people, but just did not align with me. That I'm still a good person, and that I am a God-fearing man, and that I've been able to maintain my sobriety and my thoughts and my dreams regardless of my struggles. My number one struggle was getting sober. I did not think there was ever going to come a day where I could not use heroin for one day. And now it has been several days. And I'm very proud of the life that I have created by for myself as a result of doing these good things, being held accountable, and thank God I have the outside support that continues to humble me, along with God. So I just want to be remembered as a good person who helps others.
That's a great answer. So final question is, what is one thing that you want someone to take away from seeing this?
That's, as a man, speaking on things that you're struggling with is not weak, that we are possible of recovery in all aspects of recovery. Men do have eating disorders. Men can recover from them. And there should be no fear of judgment for speaking on that. I think that's a huge part. And that, if you stay, life gets better. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Keep showing up for yourself and keep fighting, because life is so good now. I remember when I thought that drugs were the only thing that I had going for me, regardless of my upbringing and the fact that was so far from the truth. I did not think there was a way that I would be able to manage without being high all day, every day. And now I'm so far removed from it, and life is so good that I couldn't see myself giving this up for any fleeting high. So
That's beautiful, man. Well, thank you for the impact that your story has in what you do now to help those that are still struggling and see what life is like on the other side.
Thank you for
Appreciate you.
having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.